The offering was where villages sent the daughters no one would miss. And as Sable stood among the trembling women lined up for the Alpha King's selection, she did what she had always done. She made herself invisible. While the others preened and posed, desperate to catch a noble's eye, Sable kept her gaze fixed on the ground, her dark hair falling like a curtain across her face. She wore no ribbons, no paint on her lips, just a simple wool dress the color of ash, chosen specifically because it drew no attention. The whispers followed her anyway. "That one never speaks," a merchant's daughter hissed. "They say she's cursed." "I heard she killed a man with her bare hands," another added. They weren't entirely wrong, and they weren't entirely right either. Sable's secret wasn't visible to the eye. It lived deeper than skin, darker than shadow. And if the Alpha King discovered what slept inside her veins, he wouldn't just reject her. He would execute her. So when King Kadric of Valdrin strode into the village square, past daughters of lords and wealthy merchants, past beauties who had prepared for this moment their entire lives, Sable didn't look up. She didn't breathe. She prayed to every forgotten god that he would pass her by the way everyone always did. He stopped directly in front of her. "This one," he said. "She will be my Luna." The square erupted into chaos, but Sable heard only silence, because she understood something no one else could. He had just chosen his own destruction. The Alpha King offered her everything: protection, power, a crown. He asked only one thing in return. She must never expect his love. Neither of them understood how impossible that promise would become. The selection ceremony had transformed Millbrook's village square into something unrecognizable. Banners of deep crimson hung from every post, bearing the snarling wolf crest of Valdrin's royal house. Torches flickered despite the afternoon sun, casting dancing shadows across the wooden platform where 23 women stood arranged like offerings before an altar. Which, Sable supposed, they were. Every 5 years, villages across the kingdom presented their unmarried daughters to the Alpha King and his nobles. It was called an honor, a privilege, the chance for a common-born girl to rise above her station. But Sable saw the truth in the eyes of the women beside her. The eldest was perhaps 30, her beauty fading, and her desperation sharp as a blade. She had been passed over twice before. There would be no fourth chance. Beside her stood a girl barely 16, pushed forward by parents who couldn't afford another mouth to feed. She was crying silently, tears cutting clean tracks through the powder on her cheeks. And at the far end, separated from the others by an invisible wall of whispers, stood Sable. She had not been pushed here by ambitious parents. Her father, Aldous Varen, wanted her gone for different reasons entirely, darker reasons. She could feel his gaze burning into her back from somewhere in the crowd, willing her to be chosen, to become someone else's problem, to disappear. "Stand straighter," the woman beside her hissed. "You'll never catch anyone's eye like that." That was precisely the point. Sable hunched further, letting her hair shadow her features. The brands on her wrists were covered by long sleeves, the mark between her shoulder blades hidden beneath thick wool. As long as no one looked too closely, as long as she remained unremarkable, she might survive this day unchosen. Then she could return to her quiet existence, invisible, forgotten, safe. The village elder droned through introductions, listing bloodlines and accomplishments with practiced disinterest. A baker's daughter who made the finest bread in 3 counties. A seamstress whose embroidery had been worn by a duchess. A horseman's girl who could break any stallion. Sable had no accomplishments worth mentioning. None that wouldn't result in her immediate execution, at least. A horn sounded. The crowd's murmur died instantly, replaced by a silence so complete that Sable could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. He had arrived. The Alpha King's presence preceded him like a physical force. Sable felt it rolling through the square, pressing against her chest, demanding submission from every wolf in attendance. Her own wolf, the beast she kept caged so deep inside that most days she forgot it existed, stirred restlessly. "Down," she commanded silently. "Stay down." She didn't look up as his footsteps approached the platform. Heavy boots on wooden boards. Slow, deliberate. The footsteps of a predator who had never known prey to escape him. The other women straightened, lifted their chins, pushed out their chests. Sable could smell their hope, their fear, their desperate wanting. It was almost enough to mask her own terror. Almost. The footsteps stopped at the first woman. A pause. Movement. They continued. Second woman. Third. Fourth. Each pause felt like an eternity. Each resumed step felt like a reprieve. He was getting closer. Sable's fingernails bit into her palms. "Please pass me by. Please pass me by. Please." The footsteps stopped. The silence stretched and stretched. Sable could feel him studying her, not just looking, seeing. His gaze pressed against her like a physical weight, searching for something beyond the curtain of dark hair, beyond the ash-colored dress, beyond every wall she had built to protect herself. "Look at me." His voice was low, commanding. Not loud, but impossible to ignore. Sable's wolf whimpered. She raised her head. King Cadric of Valdren was not what she expected. She had imagined someone older, perhaps, weathered by battle and politics. Instead, the man before her couldn't have been more than 30 winters old. His hair was the color of a moonless night, cropped short at the sides but longer on top, falling across a face that seemed carved from cold marble. High cheekbones, a sharp jaw, and eyes. Gods above, his eyes. They were silver. Not gray, not pale blue. Silver, like polished steel, like winter starlight, like something not entirely human. Those eyes held hers without blinking. "What's your name?" he asked. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Sable. Sable Varen." "Sable." He repeated it slowly, as if tasting the word. Something flickered across his expression. Recognition? Interest? She couldn't tell. His scent revealed nothing, just winter frost and pine, utterly controlled. "Your Majesty." The village elder hurried forward, wringing his hands. "This one is... There are better choices. The merchant's daughter, perhaps, or... Did I ask for your counsel?" The king didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The elder went pale. "No, Your Majesty." "Then be silent." Cadric's attention returned to Sable. Those silver eyes studied her face, her posture, the way her hands trembled despite her efforts to still them. She felt stripped bare, exposed, as if he could see straight through to the darkness she carried. "He knows," she thought wildly. "Somehow he knows what I am." But his next words made no sense. "This one," he announced, his voice carrying across the silent square. "She will be my Luna." The chaos that followed was instantaneous. Gasps, shouts. The merchant's daughter burst into hysterical tears. Somewhere in the crowd, Sable's father made a sound like a wounded animal, though whether from joy or fury, she couldn't tell. But Sable heard none of it. She stared at the Alpha King, her mind reeling, her wolf howling inside its cage, because she understood something that no one else in this square could possibly comprehend. She was the worst possible choice he could have made, and she had no idea why he had made it. The carriage that bore her to Valdren Keep was larger than the cottage where Sable had spent her entire life. She sat rigidly on the velvet seat, afraid to touch anything, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly. Through the window, the landscape transformed from familiar farmland into dense forest, then rolling hills, then finally, the keep. It rose from the earth like a great stone beast, towers clawing at a sky heavy with clouds. Banners snapped in the wind, guards patrolled walls thick enough to withstand a siege. And everywhere, the wolf crest of the royal house watched with hungry eyes. Sable's chest tightened. This is a mistake, she thought for the 100th time since leaving Millbrook. He'll realize it soon. He'll send me back. Or worse. The carriage rolled to a stop. A footman opened the door and offered his hand with a bow, so deep his nose nearly touched his knees. My Lady Luna. The title struck her like a physical blow. She wasn't a lady. She wasn't anyone's Luna. She was a village girl with a secret that could bring down kingdoms, and somehow she was supposed to walk into this castle and pretend to belong. She took the footman's hand anyway. The great hall swallowed her whole. Vaulted ceilings, tapestries depicting ancient hunts, a fire crackling in a hearth large enough to roast an ox. Servants lined the walls, their gazes curious but carefully blank. And at the far end of the hall, seated behind a desk covered in documents, was the king. He had changed from his traveling clothes into something simpler, a dark tunic, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle. Without his crown, without the formality of the selection ceremony, he looked almost ordinary. Almost. Then his eyes lifted to meet hers, and ordinary vanished. Leave us, he said to the servants. They scattered like leaves before a storm. Within moments, Sable stood alone with the most powerful man in the realm. Silence hung between them. She should curtsy, should lower her gaze, should do any of the 100 things a proper lady was supposed to do when presented to a king. Instead, she stood frozen, her heart racing, her wolf pressing against its chains. Sit. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. Sable sat. Cadric studied her the way one might study a puzzle with missing pieces. That same intensity from the selection ceremony burned in his silver gaze. That same unreadable control masked his scent. You're wondering why I chose you, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, she admitted. Everyone is wondering. A ghost of something? Amusement? Bitterness? Butchen flickered across his face. The council is furious. They had arranged a selection of noble-born daughters, princesses from allied kingdoms, women with bloodlines and dowries and political value. His jaw tightened. I chose none of them. Sable's hands twisted in her lap. Your Majesty, I should tell you. You should tell me nothing. The interruption was sharp enough to cut. Cadric rose from his desk and moved to the window, his back to her. The dying light caught the planes of his face, turning it to shadow and silver. I didn't choose you for your bloodline, he said quietly. Or your beauty, though you possess more than you seem to realize. I chose you because you were trying to disappear. Sable's breath caught. Every other woman in that square was desperate to be seen. You alone wished to be invisible. He turned to face her. Do you know what that tells me? She shook her head, unable to speak. It tells me you have no expectations, no ambitions, no designs on my crown or my heart. His voice hardened. And that is precisely what I require. Understanding began to dawn, cold and heavy in her chest. You want a Luna who won't want you, she said slowly. I want a Luna who will ask nothing of me beyond what I am willing to give. He crossed to stand before her, close enough that she had to crane her neck to meet his eyes. You will have everything a queen could desire. Chambers, servants, gowns, jewels. I will protect you with my life and my kingdom. He paused. But I will never love you. The words hung in the air between them, cold as the frost that seemed to cling to his very skin. Because now, this close, Sable realized something she hadn't noticed before. He was cold. Literally cold. The air around him carried a chill that had nothing to do with the season. You will share my bed until an heir is produced, he continued. After that, we will have no further obligations to each other. You will live your life. I will live mine. We will appear together at formal functions. We will maintain the appearance of unity. His silver eyes held hers without flinching. But we will never be mates. Not truly. Do you understand? Sable should have refused. Should have demanded explanations. Should have asked why a king who could have anyone would propose such a hollow arrangement. Instead, she thought of Millbrook, of her father's hatred, of her sister's fear, of the mark between her shoulder blades that could condemn her to death by fire. Here, this cold king offered her something she had never dared dream of: safety without scrutiny, protection without intimacy, a life where no one would look at her closely enough to discover what she truly was. "I understand," she said quietly. He blinked. For just a moment, confusion cracked his perfect control. "You accept? Just like that?" "Yes." "You don't want to negotiate? To demand more?" Sable met his gaze steadily. "Your Majesty, you're offering me more than I ever expected to have. More than I deserve." Cold over cruelty, she thought, remembering her father's fists, her sister's cutting words, the villagers who whispered monster when they thought she couldn't hear. "I'll choose cold over cruelty every time." Something shifted in the king's expression. Not warmth, nothing so simple, but something that might have been curiosity, or perhaps respect. "The ceremony will take place in 3 days," he said finally. "My steward will see to your preparations." He moved toward the door, then paused without turning. "You're hiding something," he said. "I can sense it. I don't know what it is, and I find that I don't particularly care. Whatever your secrets are, keep them. I have no interest in discovering them." Then he was gone. Sable sat alone in the vast hall, her hands still trembling, her wolf still howling inside its cage. He didn't want to know her secrets. But what would happen when those secrets refused to stay hidden? The morning of the contract ceremony arrived wrapped in fog so thick that Sable couldn't see the gardens from her chamber window. She had barely slept. The bed they'd given her was larger than any she'd ever occupied, dressed in silks softer than anything she'd ever touched. Servants had come and gone throughout the night, bringing food she was too nervous to eat, offering to draw baths she was too afraid to accept. She couldn't let them see the marks. She had wrapped herself in bandages before allowing the maids to dress her. The brands on her wrists, the binding marks her father had seared into her flesh when she was barely 13, could be explained as old injuries. The maids had accepted that lie without question. But the mark between her shoulder blades was different. Not a brand at all, but a birthmark. An ancient sigil she'd carried since the day she was born. The mark that had sealed her fate the moment her father recognized it for what it was. Today, at the ceremony, she would face far more scrutinizing eyes. "Lady Luna." A soft knock preceded the voice. "The king requests your presence in the council chamber." Sable pressed a hand to her churning stomach, took a steadying breath, and opened the door. The council chamber was twice the size of the king's study, dominated by a table of dark oak that could have seated 30. Windows lined one wall, their glass so clear that the fog beyond seemed to press against them like something alive. King Cadric sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 advisors in formal robes. His expression revealed nothing. His scent remained that same wall of winter frost. And at the far end of the table, looking as if he'd swallowed something poisonous, sat her father. Aldous Varan had dressed in his finest clothes, which meant he looked slightly less shabby than usual. His thinning hair was slicked back, his narrow eyes fixed on Sable with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Beside him sat Petra, her sister. Where their father looked furious, Petra looked frightened. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. "Sit," Cadric commanded, gesturing to the empty chair near him. Sable sat. The distance between herself and her father felt like both a chasm and not nearly enough. One of the advisors, a gray-haired man with shrewd eyes, cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, the contract has been prepared according to your specifications. If you wish, I can summarize the terms for all parties." "That won't be necessary." Cadric picked up the document, scanned it briefly, then set it down. The terms are simple. He looked at Sable, or rather, at the space where her eyes were, that same penetrating gaze that seemed to see through everything. First and most importantly, you will be Luna of Valdrin in all public matters. You will receive the respect and protection due to a queen. No one in my kingdom will be permitted to mistreat you, disrespect you, or question your position. Sable's breath caught. She hadn't expected that. Second, he continued, you will have complete autonomy within the keep. Your chambers are your own. Your time is your own. You may pursue whatever interests you wish. I will make no demands upon your presence beyond what is necessary for court functions and— He paused almost imperceptibly. The production of heirs. Across the table her father shifted forward. Your Majesty, before this proceeds further, there are things you should know about my daughter. She is not— I wasn't addressing you. The king's voice could have frozen fire. Aldous Varen went pale, his mouth snapping shut. Kadric's attention returned to Sable. Do you find these terms acceptable? Before she could answer, her father surged forward again. Your Majesty, please! You don't understand what you're agreeing to. She's dangerous. Unnatural. If you knew what she was capable of— Silence. The word cracked through the chamber like a whip. Both advisors flinched. Petra whimpered softly. Even Sable felt the force of it pressing against her chest. Kadric rose slowly from his chair, his silver eyes fixed on Aldous Varen with an expression that promised violence. You dare, he said quietly, to speak over your king? To interrupt proceedings that will determine the future of this kingdom? To insult the woman I have chosen as Luna in my own council chamber? Aldous' face went from pale to gray. I only meant— I know precisely what you meant. Kadric's lip curled. You meant to sabotage your own daughter. To poison me against her before she has even spoken a word in her defense. He moved around the table, each step slow and deliberate, until he stood directly before Aldous. The temperature in the room dropped. Frost actually appeared on the edge of the nearest window, crackling outward like spreading fingers. I chose your daughter despite your protests. I chose her because she was the only woman in that square who seemed to want nothing from me. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And now I discover that her own father was hoping she would fail, that he would rather see her condemned than chosen. A pause. Heavy. Suffocating. You disgust me. Aldous opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again. No sound came out. Kadric turned his back on the man and returned to his seat. When he looked at Sable, something had shifted in his expression. Not warmth, still nothing so simple, but something that might have been understanding. I was not speaking to your father, he said quietly. I was speaking to you, my future Luna. His emphasis on the title felt deliberate, protective. Are these terms acceptable? Sable's throat tightened with an emotion she couldn't name. Yes, she managed. They're more than acceptable, Your Majesty. They're more than I ever dared hope for. The words seemed to confuse him. That same flicker of bewilderment she'd seen before crossed his face. You find being bound to a king who will never love you acceptable? I find being safe acceptable. The words came out before she could stop them. I find being protected acceptable. I find being treated with dignity for the first time in my life more than acceptable. She felt her father's glare burning into the side of her face. Felt Petra's sharp intake of breath, but she kept her eyes on the king. You've offered me terms that most women would reject as cold and empty, but Your Majesty doesn't understand. Her voice steadied. Cold isn't cruelty. Empty isn't hatred. What you're offering me is more kindness than I've ever received from my own blood. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Kadric nodded slowly. Sign here. She signed. Her father signed as witness, his hand trembling with barely contained rage. The advisors signed, exchanging glances that spoke of confusion and curiosity. And then, it was done. She was to be Luna of Valdrin, bound to this silver-eyed king who promised her everything except the one thing most women wanted. As she rose to leave, a hand caught her arm. Petra. Her sister's face was pale, her eyes swimming with tears. "We need to speak," she whispered. "Alone." Against her better judgment, Sable nodded. They found an empty alcove off the main corridor, a small space barely large enough for two people, its window overlooking the fog-shrouded gardens. "You should refuse him," Petra said without preamble. Sable blinked. "What?" "Walk away. Now. Before it's too late." "Why would I possibly do that? He's offering you a cage wrapped in silk." Petra's grip on her arm tightened. "And when he discovers what's under your bandages, when he learns what you really are, that cage will become a pyre." Sable went cold. "He's promised never to look beneath. Promises mean nothing." Her sister's voice cracked. "He's the Alpha King, Sable, the most powerful wolf in existence. Do you really think he'll never demand to see his own Luna? Never question why she hides herself from him? He said he doesn't care about my secrets." "He doesn't care yet." Petra's eyes blazed. "But eventually his curiosity will overcome his indifference, and when he sees that birthmark on your back, when he realizes what it means, when he connects it to what happened to Lennart." "I didn't do anything to Lennart." The words came out sharper than she intended. "I told you. I told everyone. I don't know what happened that night." "You were there." Petra's voice dropped to a hiss. "You were the last one to see him alive. And then he burned, Sable. Burned from the inside out. And you expect me to believe that had nothing to do with you? With what lives inside you?" Sable's wolf stirred, pressing against its chains. She forced it down. "I was angry," she admitted. "Yes. He broke our betrothal. He chose you instead. I was furious." Her hands clenched at her sides. "But I didn't kill him. I couldn't have killed him. Father bound my power when I was 13. The brands on my wrists. You've seen them. Whatever I am, whatever sleeps inside me, it's been locked away for years." Petra studied her for a long moment. Something flickered in her expression. Doubt, perhaps. Or maybe something softer. Then it hardened again. "The king seems gentle now," she said quietly. "But kings are never gentle for long, and when he discovers he's married a monster, he won't simply send you home." She turned and walked away before Sable could respond. Monster. The word echoed in the empty alcove long after Petra had gone. Sable touched the bandages wrapped around her wrists, felt the raised flesh of the binding brands beneath. Her sister wasn't wrong about one thing. The king would eventually want to see what she was hiding. And when he did, everything would burn. The Luna ceremony was held at twilight. Sable had been dressed by a team of silent servants who moved with practiced efficiency, their hands gentle but impersonal. They had wrapped her in a gown of midnight blue velvet, heavy enough to conceal the bandages beneath. A circlet of silver and moonstone rested on her brow. Her dark hair had been braided with tiny crystals that caught the fading light like captured stars. She looked like a queen. She felt like a sacrifice. "My Lady Luna." A guard bowed at her chamber door. "The procession awaits." Sable pressed a hand to her stomach, willing the nausea to subside. Through her window she could see them. Thousands of wolves gathered in the great courtyard below, nobles in their finery, common folk pressed against the barriers, all of them waiting to see the woman their king had chosen, the woman no one could explain. The walk from her chambers to the ceremonial hall felt endless. Every corridor was lined with courtiers and servants, their eyes following her like hungry wolves tracking wounded prey. Whispers slithered behind her like snakes. "Look at her, just a village girl. What hold does she have over him? There must be something wrong with her. Why else would she hide?" Sable kept her chin high and her gaze forward. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. The ceremonial hall was even more overwhelming than the Great Hall had been. Columns of white marble stretched toward a ceiling painted with scenes of ancient hunts. Candles flickered in iron chandeliers. And at the far end, standing before a dais draped in crimson silk, waited King Cadric. He wore black, as always. But tonight, a crown of twisted silver rested on his dark hair, and a cloak of wolf fur hung from his shoulders. He looked every inch the Alpha King, beautiful and terrible and utterly untouchable. His silver eyes found hers across the crowded hall. Sable walked toward him alone. No father to escort her. She had made that clear, and to her surprise, Cadric had not questioned it. Aldous Varen stood somewhere in the crowd, no doubt seething, but she refused to seek him out. He had forfeited any claim to this moment years ago, the first time his fist had connected with her face. The priest was ancient, his voice like rustling parchment as he began the ceremony. Sable barely heard the words. She was too aware of Cadric beside her, radiating that strange cold that seemed to deepen with each passing moment. The vows came. Do you, Cadric, Alpha King of Valdren, take this woman as your Luna, your queen, your mate? I do. His voice carried through the hall without effort. Then his head turned, and those silver eyes fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. Understand this, he said quietly, for her ears alone. What I offer you is protection, safety, status. A pause. But not my heart. Never that. Sable nodded slowly. I understand, Your Majesty. Do you? Something flickered in his gaze, doubt perhaps, or guilt. Because most women would find such terms lacking. I am not most women. The priest cleared his throat. And do you, Sable of House Varen, take this man as your alpha, your king, your mate? I do. Then by the ancient laws of our kind, I pronounce you bound, Luna to Alpha, Queen to King. The priest smiled benevolently. You may claim your mate, Your Majesty. The hall held its breath. This was the moment, the claiming bite that would bind them together, that would leave its mark on her throat for all to see. It would require him to push aside her collar, to expose her neck, to... Sable's heart hammered against her ribs. Cadric stepped closer. His hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't move, his fingers brushed the high collar of her gown. She tensed. Peace, he murmured. I won't expose you. Before she could process his words, he leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead. Not her throat. Her forehead. A gentle kiss that promised nothing and asked for nothing. When he straightened, his expression remained controlled, but something warm flickered in the depths of his silver eyes. The claiming will be completed in private, he announced to the hall. My Luna's modesty will be respected. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Confusion, disappointment. Some of the nobles exchanged glances that spoke of suspicion, but Sable barely noticed. He had protected her. Again. Without her having to ask. The feast that followed was a blur of rich food and richer wine. Sable sat beside Cadric on the dais, accepting congratulations from an endless stream of nobles whose names she immediately forgot. Through it all, the king remained distant but attentive, ensuring her goblet was never empty, that no one approached her with anything less than respect. When the hour grew late and the crowd began to thin, he leaned close. You're exhausted, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm fine, Your Majesty. You're lying. The ghost of a smile tugged at his lips. Come, I'll escort you to your chambers. They walked through the corridors in silence, guards trailing at a respectful distance. Sable's exhaustion pressed against her like a physical weight, making her steps unsteady. At her door, Cadric paused. Tonight, you rest, he said. Tomorrow, we discuss what comes next. Sable nodded, then hesitated. Your Majesty, thank you. For what you did at the ceremony. For not... I made you a promise. His voice was quiet but firm. I intend to keep it. He turned and walked away before she could respond. Sable watched him go. This strange, cold king who seemed determined to protect a woman he claimed he would never love. What was he hiding behind those walls of frost? And why did she suddenly, desperately want to find out? 3 nights passed before he came to her. Sable had spent those nights alone, alternating between restless sleep and wakeful anxiety. The servants brought her meals she barely touched, books she couldn't focus on, news of court proceedings that seemed to concern another world entirely. She was the Luna of Valdren, and yet she had never felt more invisible. On the 4th night, a knock came at her chamber door. Her heart lurched. She knew somehow before she even opened it. "May I enter?" Kadric stood in the corridor, dressed simply in a dark tunic and loose trousers. Without his crown, without his furs, he looked almost vulnerable, almost human. "Of course, Your Majesty." He stepped inside, and the temperature dropped noticeably. The fire in her hearth flickered, fighting against a chill that had no natural source. "You're cold," Sable observed. "I'm always cold." He moved to stand by the window, his back to her. "It's a family affliction. Nothing to concern yourself with." But it did concern her. She'd noticed it at the ceremony, at the feast, in the brief moments they'd been close. The cold that clung to him wasn't normal. It wasn't natural. And it seemed to be getting worse. "I've come to discuss the terms of our arrangement," he said, specifically the matter of heirs. Sable's mouth went dry. "I see. The council is impatient." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "They expected an announcement by now. Evidence that our union is more than ceremonial." "And what do you expect, Your Majesty?" For a long moment he simply looked at her. Those silver eyes traced her face, her throat, the shape of her body beneath the modest nightgown she wore. "I expect nothing," he said finally. "I am asking." The distinction wasn't lost on her. He could have demanded, could have claimed his rights as her king and her mate. Instead, he stood across the room, hands clasped behind his back, waiting for her answer. "I understood the terms when I accepted them," Sable said quietly. "An heir is part of our bargain." Understanding and accepting are different things. He took a step closer. "I won't force you, Sable. Not tonight. Not ever. If you need more time, I don't." The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise him. She crossed the distance between them, stopping close enough to feel the chill radiating from his skin. Her wolf stirred, not in fear, but in something that felt dangerously like anticipation. "I'm not afraid of you," she said. It was almost true. "Perhaps you should be." "Why?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a strip of dark silk. "I will wear this," he said, "so there can be no question of me seeing what you wish to hide." Sable's breath caught. A blindfold. He was offering to blind himself rather than violate her secrets. "Turn around," she whispered. He obeyed without hesitation. Her hands trembled as she reached up to tie the blindfold. She had to rise on her toes, had to press close enough that she could smell him, pine and frost and something darker beneath. Up close, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the rigid control he maintained even in this moment of vulnerability. The knot secured, she stepped back. "It's done," she said. He turned toward her, sightless now, guided only by sound and scent. The darkness seemed to transform him. Without those piercing silver eyes, he was somehow less intimidating, more human. "Where are you?" he asked softly. "Here." His hands rose slowly, searching. When they found her shoulders, she shivered. Not from cold, though his touch was ice against her skin, but from something far more unsettling. "You're warm," he murmured. "So warm." His thumbs traced circles against her collarbone, gentle, patient, as if he had all the time in the world. "The candles," she said. "Should I leave them?" I can see nothing either way. A pause. But, if the darkness would make you more comfortable, she extinguished them anyway. The room plunged into shadow, lit only by the dying fire. In the darkness, everything changed. His hands found the ties of her nightgown, loosening them with careful deliberation. The fabric pooled at her feet, leaving her exposed, but somehow, in the blindness, she felt safer than she had in years. He couldn't see the bandages wrapped around her torso, couldn't see the scars beneath. He could only feel. "Tell me if I should stop," he said. "Don't stop." His lips found her throat, her shoulder, the curve of her collarbone. Each kiss was cool and soft, a contrast to the heat building in her chest. Her wolf howled inside its cage, straining toward him, wanting. "No," she commanded, "stay down." But for the first time in years, the beast didn't want to obey. His hands mapped her body with aching slowness, the dip of her waist, the swell of her hips. When his palm pressed against the small of her back, she gasped, both from the cold and from the sudden fear that he would feel the bandages, would ask questions she couldn't answer. But his hand moved on. He guided her to the bed, laying her down with a gentleness that stole her breath. Then his body covered hers, and she understood why the women of Valdrin composed poetry about their king. It wasn't his beauty, though that was undeniable. It was his care, his attention. The way he learned her responses and adjusted accordingly, never rushing, never demanding. The way he made her feel precious when she had spent her entire life feeling disposable. When they finally came together, she cried out. Not from pain, though there was some, but from the overwhelming sensation of connection. His cold against her warmth. His control against her surrender. His silence against her sighs. Afterward, he lay beside her in the darkness, his breathing ragged. "You're crying," he said. She hadn't realized she was. Her fingers found her cheeks, wet with tears she couldn't explain. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know why. Don't apologize." His hand found hers, squeezing gently. His fingers were still cold, but somehow, the chill felt different now. Comforting, almost. "I should be asking if I hurt you." "You didn't." She turned toward him, wishing she could see his face. "You were kind." The word seemed to confuse him. She heard it in his silence, felt it in the sudden tension of his body. "I don't know how to be kind," he said finally. "It's not in my nature." "Then what was tonight?" Another silence. Longer this time. "Necessity," he said. But his voice lacked conviction. She felt him rise from the bed, heard the rustle of fabric as he dressed in the darkness. But instead of leaving immediately, his footsteps approached her side. His lips brushed her forehead. That same gentle kiss from the ceremony. "Sleep well, Luna," he murmured. Then he was gone, taking his cold with him, leaving her alone with a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heart race. "This is dangerous," she thought. "He said he would never love me. He made that clear." But as she drifted toward sleep, a treacherous whisper curled through her mind. What if I could make him break that vow? He returned the next night. And the night after that. Sable told herself it was merely duty. The production of heirs required consistency after all. The council would expect evidence of a proper union. There was nothing personal about it. But each night, the darkness revealed something new. The way his breathing changed when she touched him. The soft sounds he made when she grew bold. The way his hands lingered on her skin long after necessity demanded. And always, always, the cold. It was getting worse. She was certain of it now. When he first came to her, his skin had been merely cool. Now, some nights, frost actually formed on the sheets where he lay. His lips turned faintly blue in the firelight. His fingers left trails of ice against her warmth. "You're freezing," she said one night, pulling back from his embrace, literally freezing. "It's nothing." His voice was tight, controlled. "It's not nothing. You're like touching a snowbank." She felt him stiffen beside her. "I told you. It's a family condition. Nothing to concern yourself with. And I'm your Luna. Your concerns are my concerns." Silence. Then quietly, "Why do you care?" The question stopped her cold. If she could forgive the pun. Why did she care? He'd made his terms clear. No love, no emotional entanglement. Just the production of heirs and the maintenance of appearances. She should be grateful for his indifference, not frustrated by it. And yet, "I don't know," she admitted. "But I do." He left earlier than usual that night, and the next morning, Sable made a decision. She needed advice. The palace healer was a wizened woman named Morven, who had served 3 generations of Valdrin kings. Her quarters smelled of dried herbs and something faintly sulphurous, and her eyes, one brown, one milky white, seemed to see far more than they should. "The new Luna." Morven's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I wondered when you'd come." "You were expecting me?" "I'm always expecting the queens. Sooner or later, they all have questions." The old woman gestured to a chair. "Sit. Ask." Sable sat. "It's about the king." "Ah." Morven began sorting through a collection of glass vials, her movements practiced and precise. "The cold. You know about it?" "Child, I've known about it longer than you've been alive." The healer's milky eye fixed on her with unsettling intensity. "Every king of the Valdrin line carries it. A chill in the blood that no fire can warm." "But why? Is it a curse? A sickness?" Morven was silent for a long moment. Then she said carefully, "Some questions are not mine to answer." "Whose are they?" "The king's." The healer turned back to her vials. "Ask him. If he trusts you, he'll tell you. If he doesn't." She shrugged. "Then perhaps you're not meant to know." That night, when Kadric came to her chambers, Sable didn't reach for him immediately. "We need to talk," she said. He paused in the doorway, his expression wary. "About?" "About why you're freezing to death." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. She saw frost creeping across the window pane, heard the fire in the hearth sputter and dim. "I told you." "It's a family condition, yes, you've said." She stood her ground, though her wolf was whimpering inside her chest. "But it's getting worse, isn't it? Every night you're colder. Every night the frost spreads further." He said nothing. "I'm your Luna," she continued. "I know you don't love me. I know you don't want to love me. But I'm still the woman who shares your bed, who will bear your children. Don't I deserve to know what's killing you?" The word hung between them. Killing. Kedric's jaw clenched. For a moment she thought he would turn and leave, would shut her out the way he shut everyone out. Then his shoulders sagged. "Not killing," he said quietly. "Not yet." He crossed to the fireplace, staring into the dying flames. The frost on the windows thickened. "My great-great-grandfather made a bargain," he said. "Generations ago, before Valdrin was even a kingdom. He was a warlord then, ruthless and ambitious. He wanted power beyond anything a mere wolf could achieve." Sable held her breath. He found a witch. An old one. Older than the mountains. She offered him exactly what he sought. The strength to conquer nations, to build an empire, to become legend. His voice hardened. "But magic always has a price." "What price?" "The warmth of his bloodline." Kadric turned to face her, and for the first time she saw something raw in his silver eyes. "Every king of Valdrin is born with ice in his veins. We feel cold constantly. We radiate cold. And as we age, it worsens." "How much worse?" "My father was 53 when the cold finally claimed him. He froze from the inside out." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "His father was 48, his grandfather 42. The curse strengthens with each generation." Sable's blood chilled. How old are you? 31. And how much time? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost him something. A decade, perhaps. Perhaps less. The cold accelerates unpredictably. She stared at him, this beautiful doomed king, and something shifted in her chest. Something that felt dangerously like her heart cracking open. There must be a cure, she said. A way to break the curse. There isn't. How do you know? Have you tried? I have tried everything. The words erupted from him with unexpected force. Witches, healers, priests, shamans. I have scoured every corner of this kingdom and beyond. There is no cure, Sable. There is only time, and I have very little of it. He turned back to the fire, his hands clenched at his sides. Now you understand, he said quietly. Why I chose a woman who wanted nothing from me, why I insisted on terms that required no love. His voice dropped. I will be dead within a decade, perhaps sooner. What kind of monster would make a woman fall in love with him? Knowing that. Oh, Sable thought. Oh, you foolish, noble, tragic man. She crossed to him, reaching for his hand. His fingers were ice in her grip, but she held on anyway. What if the cold isn't just from the curse? She asked softly. He frowned. What do you mean? You've spent your whole life preparing to die, pushing everyone away so no one would mourn you, closing yourself off so you wouldn't feel the loss of what you'd never have. She squeezed his frozen fingers. What if some of the cold comes from that? From the loneliness? He stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign tongue. That's ridiculous, he said. Is it? She stepped closer, close enough to feel the chill radiating from his body. Since I came here, have you been warmer or colder? He didn't answer, but she saw the flicker in his eyes, the uncertainty. I can't break your curse, she said. I don't have that power. But maybe? She hesitated, unsure if she should continue. Maybe I can make whatever time you have left less cold. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither of them could say. Then Kadric reached up and cupped her face with his frozen hand. You should hate me, he murmured. I've trapped you in a marriage with a dying man, given you nothing but a hollow crown and a future of grief. You've given me safety, she said. Protection. A life where no one strikes me or calls me monster. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Is that really enough? No, she thought. It isn't. I want more. I want you to look at me the way I've started looking at you. I want to matter to you the way you're starting to matter to me. But she couldn't say that. Not yet. Not when he was so certain he was going to die. It's enough for now, she said instead. He kissed her then. Not gently, not carefully, desperately, like a drowning man clutching at air. And when they fell into bed together, Sable felt the first crack in the wall around his heart. It would take more than one night to bring it down, but she was starting to believe she might have a chance. Later, as he slept beside her, actually slept, for the first time, his arm wrapped around her waist, Sable lay awake in the darkness. His skin was still cold. The frost still crept across the windows. But somewhere beneath her palm, pressed against his chest, she felt his heart beating. Slow, steady, strong. I'm falling in love with him, she realized with sudden, terrifying clarity. I'm falling in love with a man who is dying, who has forbidden himself to love me back. She should pull away, protect herself, build her own walls to match his. But as his arm tightened around her in sleep, as he murmured something soft and indistinct against her hair, Sable knew it was already too late. She was his. The only question was whether she could make him hers before the cold claimed him forever. 2 months passed. 2 months of stolen nights and whispered conversations. 2 months of Sable learning the landscape of her husband's frozen heart, one careful touch at a time. He still wore the blindfold when he came to her, still honored his promise never to look upon what she hid. But other things had changed. He stayed longer now. Sometimes through the night, sometimes until dawn painted the windows gold. He talked to her, really talked, about the burdens of ruling, about childhood memories of a father who grew colder with each passing year, about fears he'd never spoken aloud to anyone. And she listened, held him, warmed him in whatever small ways she could. The council noticed the change. The servants whispered about how the king smiled now, actually smiled, when he thought no one was watching. The frost that had always clung to the throne room walls seemed less severe, but Sable noticed something else. She was late. "My Luna." Morven peered at her with that unsettling, mismatched gaze. "You've gone quite pale." Sable sat in the healer's quarters, hands clenched in her lap, heart racing. "I need to know for certain." The old woman's examination was thorough but gentle. When she finished, something that might have been a smile crossed her weathered face. "You carry the king's heir," Morven said. "Perhaps 2 months along, by my estimation." The world tilted. Pregnant. She was pregnant with Kadrick's child, the heir he needed, the purpose of their entire arrangement. She should have been relieved, happy, even. This was what they'd agreed to. This was why he came to her chambers night after night. But all she could think was, now he has what he wanted. Now he'll stop coming. "My Luna." Morven's voice cut through her spiral. "This is good news, is it not?" "Yes," Sable managed. "Of course, I'm just overwhelmed." She returned to her chambers in a daze. The servants had laid out her evening gown, prepared her bath, and arranged flowers on every surface. They were already celebrating, somehow knowing before she'd even had time to process. When night fell, she waited. The knock came at the usual hour. Kadrick entered, already reaching for his blindfold, already moving toward her with that hungry urgency that had developed between them. "Wait!" Her voice stopped him mid-step. "I need to tell you something." He went still. In the firelight, she could see concern flickering across his features. "What is it? Are you unwell?" "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Then Kadrick crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. "You're certain?" His voice was rough, unsteady. "The healer confirmed it?" "Yes." His hand found her stomach, pressing against the flat surface where their child was growing. She felt him trembling. Not from cold, but from something else entirely. "An heir," he breathed. "A child. Our child." The wonder in his voice cracked something open inside her. "You're happy," she said, and couldn't keep the surprise from her tone. "Happy?" He pulled back to look at her, his silver eyes shimmering in the candlelight. "Sable, I had accepted that I would die without knowing what it felt like to be a father. That the curse would take me before I could hold my own child." His jaw tightened. "You've given me something I never thought I'd have." "You still have time," she said quickly. "The healer said you might have a decade. I have more than that now." He cupped her face with both hands. "I have hope." She should have been reassured, should have accepted his joy and let it warm her, but the fear wouldn't quiet. "The terms of our agreement," she heard herself say. "You said once an heir was produced, we would have no further obligations to each other." Kadrick's hand stilled on her face. "You said we would live separate lives," she continued, her voice cracking despite her efforts. "That you would have no interest in me beyond what was necessary." "Sable, was that true?" The question burst from her like water from a breaking dam. "Is that what happens now? You have your heir, so you stop coming? You go back to being cold and distant and—" He silenced her with a kiss. Not gentle, not careful. Desperate and consuming and full of everything he'd spent months refusing to say. When he finally pulled back, they were both gasping. "I was a fool," he said hoarsely. "I thought I could keep you at arm's length. Thought I could take your body without wanting your heart." His forehead pressed against hers. I was wrong. Sable's pulse thundered in her ears. What are you saying? I'm saying that I don't want separate lives. I don't want distance or coldness or obligations. His hands tightened on her waist. I want you, Sable. Every part of you. Every secret. Every scar. Every... Don't. The word escaped her in a panicked breath. Kaedric, please don't say it. But he was beyond stopping now. The walls were crumbling. The ice was cracking. And Sable could only watch as the man she loved destroyed himself with the truth. I love you, he said. The words hung in the air for one perfect, terrible moment. Then Kaedric's eyes went wide. His hand flew to his chest. No, Sable gasped. No, no, no. Frost exploded across his skin, not the gradual creeping cold she'd grown accustomed to, but a violent, consuming freeze that turned his lips blue and his breath to visible mist. He collapsed. Kaedric! She caught him before he hit the ground, pulling him into her lap, feeling the ice spreading beneath her palms. His skin was so cold it burned. His heartbeat was slowing, each pulse weaker than the last. Help! She screamed. Someone help! The king is dying! Servants burst through the door. Guards. Morven, moving faster than her ancient body should have allowed. But Sable saw the horror in their eyes, the resignation. They'd known this would happen. They'd always known. The curse. Morven said quietly, kneeling beside them. It's accelerating. The moment a Valdrin king loves, truly loves, the cold consumes him. Then make him stop loving me? Sable was sobbing now, clutching his frozen body. There must be something. A spell. A potion. There is nothing. Morven's voice was gentle but final. Nothing that can unmake love once it's spoken. Kaedric's eyes fluttered open. They found hers even through the frost clouding his vision. Don't. Regret. His voice was barely a whisper. Worth it. Loving you. Don't you dare. She gripped his face with both hands, trying to transfer her warmth into him. Don't you dare leave me? Not now. Not when I finally... She couldn't finish. Couldn't speak the words that would only accelerate his death. But he knew. She could see it in his eyes. The understanding. The peace. You love me too, he breathed. Almost smiled. Should have... known. Couldn't resist. Then his eyes closed and his body went still. 3 days. For 3 days, Sable sat beside Kaedric's frozen body, refusing to eat, refusing to sleep, refusing to accept what everyone else had already resigned themselves to. He wasn't dead. Not yet. Morven confirmed that his heart still beat, slow and faint beneath the ice encasing his chest. But he was slipping further away with each passing hour. There must be something, Sable said for the 100th time. Some way to break the curse. Morven shook her head. I've told you, child. The magic that binds him is ancient. Older than this kingdom. Older than... Than what? Sable looked up sharply. You were going to say something. The healer's mismatched eyes flickered. It's nothing. It's something. Sable rose, ignoring the dizziness that came with 3 days without food. You know more than you're telling me. I can see it. Morven was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, the witch who cast the original curse. She was not just any witch. Go on. She was a fire elemental, one of the most powerful ever born. The healer's voice dropped. They say her bloodline carried magic so strong it could melt mountains, burn through any spell, counter any curse. Sable's heart stopped. Fire elemental. The mark between her shoulder blades burned as if responding to the words. Where can I find this bloodline? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Morven's eyes fixed on her with sudden piercing intensity. I suspect, my Luna, that you already have. The ride to her father's estate took half a day. Sable pushed her horse to its limits, accompanied by a small guard of royal soldiers who asked no questions about their queen's desperate mission. The countryside blurred past, villages and forests and rivers, all of it meaningless compared to the man dying in the castle behind her. Aldous Varen's manor was smaller than she remembered, darker. Or perhaps she was simply seeing it clearly for the first time. She didn't knock. The doors burst open at her touch, not from force, but from something else. Something hot and crackling that she'd kept caged her entire life. Her father stood in the main hall, goblet in hand, face twisted with surprise that quickly soured into contempt. "So the queen returns," he sneered. "Come to gloat over your success? I need you to remove my binding." Aldous laughed. "And why would I do that?" "Because my husband is dying." She stepped closer, and the temperature in the room rose noticeably. "Because the only thing that can save him is fire magic. My fire magic." Her father's expression flickered. Just for a moment. But she caught it. Fear. "You don't know what you're asking," he said. "Your power is dangerous. Uncontrollable. If I release it..." "You'll release it or I'll tear this manor apart looking for the seal myself." Another step. The candles on the walls flared, their flames reaching toward her like eager fingers. "I know about the witch who cursed the Valdrin line. I know she was a fire elemental." Her voice hardened. "And I know her bloodline didn't just happen to show up in a village girl chosen by the king." Aldous' face went white. "You knew." Sable's voice cracked with rage. "All along you knew what I was, what I could do. That's why you bound me, isn't it? Not because I was dangerous, because you were afraid of what I'd become." "You don't understand. Then make me understand." The command burst from her with a wave of heat that shattered every window in the hall. Glass rained down around them, glittering in the sudden firelight. When the silence settled, Aldous looked old, broken, defeated. "Your mother," he said quietly, "was not the woman who raised you?" Sable went still. "I took you in as an infant. Found you on the doorstep with nothing but a blanket and a letter." He laughed bitterly. "The letter explained everything. You were the last descendant of Brenneth the Flame, the witch who cursed the Valdrin line 5 generations ago. That's impossible. The curse was cast over 100 years ago. Brenneth didn't die, foolish girl. She transformed. Became something beyond human. And before she left this realm entirely, she had a daughter. That daughter had a daughter. And so on, until eventually..." He gestured at her. "You." Sable's mind reeled. "Then the mark on my back is not a brand. It's a birthmark. The sigil of Brenneth's bloodline." Aldous' lip curled. "When I saw it, I knew what you were. Knew you carried enough power to challenge thrones. So yes, I bound you. I was protecting myself, and frankly, I was protecting the kingdom from what you might..." "You were protecting your own cowardice." The new voice came from the doorway. Petra stood there, pale and trembling, but with a resolve in her eyes that Sable had never seen before. "I found Father's journals," Petra said. "After you left for the castle, I read everything." She stepped into the hall, her gaze fixed on Aldous. "You didn't just bind her power. You killed Leonard. That's..." "He discovered the truth, didn't he?" Petra's voice rose. "He found out about Sable's heritage, about the connection to the Valdrin curse. He was going to expose everything. So you burned him and blamed it on her." "That's impossible," Sable breathed. "You don't have fire magic. How could you..." "Worm's venom," Petra said flatly. "I found the empty vial in his study, along with a receipt from a black market alchemist. It's a poison that burns the victim from within, leaves the same marks as fire magic." Her voice hardened. "He planned everything." The confession hung in the air like smoke. Aldous' face contorted. "That peasant would have ruined everything, would have brought attention to our family that..." Petra's fist connected with his jaw. It wasn't a powerful blow. She was slight and untrained. But the surprise of it sent Aldous stumbling backward. He tripped over his own feet and crashed to the floor, his head striking the stone with a sickening crack. He didn't get up. The sisters stared at each other across their father's unconscious body. "The seal," Petra said quietly. "It's in his study. Third drawer on the left, hidden behind a false panel." She met Sable's eyes. "I'll stay here. Make sure he doesn't follow you. Make sure he pays for what he's done." "Petra." "Go." Her sister's voice broke. "Save your king. Save your child. And then, maybe—" She swallowed hard. "Maybe we can start over. As sisters." Sable crossed the room and pulled Petra into a fierce embrace. "We will," she promised. "I swear we will." Then she was running. To the study, to the hidden panel, to the small wooden box that contained everything her father had stolen from her. The seal was old and worn, carved with symbols that seemed to writhe in the firelight. Sable pressed it against the brands on her wrists and pushed. Pain exploded through her. Fire roared up her arms, down her spine, across every inch of her skin. The brands burned away, leaving unmarked flesh. The seal crumbled to ash. And deep inside her, something that had been caged for 15 years finally broke free. She rode through the night. The fire inside her burned with an intensity that should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like coming home, like finally breathing after a lifetime of drowning. The castle gates flew open at her approach. Servants scattered from her path. She didn't slow, didn't stop, and didn't spare a thought for anything but the man lying frozen in the royal chambers. Morven met her at the door. "He doesn't have long," the healer said grimly. "The ice has reached his heart." Sable pushed past her. The room was cold, so cold that her breath turned to mist the moment she entered. Frost covered every surface, the walls, the floor, the bed where Kadric lay motionless. He was barely recognizable. Ice encased his skin like armor. His lips were blue-white. His eyes were closed, lashes frosted, expression peaceful in a way that looked too much like death. "Everyone out," Sable commanded. "My Luna. Now." They fled. Sable crossed to the bed and climbed onto it, straddling Kadric's frozen form. Her hands pressed against his chest, and she could feel it. The cold that had pursued him his entire life, the curse that had stolen his father, his grandfather, every king before them. Ice and fire, death and life. "You will not have him," she said. The fire answered. It poured out of her palms like liquid sunlight, burning gold and crimson and white. The ice hissed and cracked. Steam rose from Kadric's skin. The frost on the walls began to melt, running down in rivers. But the curse fought back. The cold surged up through his chest, pushing against her flames, trying to reclaim what it had almost taken. Sable gritted her teeth and pushed harder. The fire inside her roared, demanding release, demanding more. She gave it everything. Every moment of fear and loneliness, every blow her father had landed, every whisper of monster she'd endured, every night she'd spent in Kadric's arms, learning to love a man who had forbidden himself to love her back. All of it became fuel. The flames exploded outward, filling the room with blazing light. Sable screamed, from effort, from pain, from the sheer overwhelming power flooding through her veins. And then, beneath her palms, she felt it. A heartbeat, strong, steady, warm. The ice shattered. Kadric's eyes flew open, not silver anymore, but gold, blazing with reflected firelight. His chest heaved as he gasped for air. His hands found her waist, gripping hard enough to bruise. Sable. Her name on his lips was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. "What did you... how?" Later. She was crying, she realized, tears streaming down her face, evaporating in the heat that still radiated from her skin. Questions later. Just let me... She kissed him. He was warm. For the first time since she'd known him, his lips were warm against hers. His skin was warm. His hands, pulling her closer, spreading across her back, touching the mark between her shoulder blades without flinching. Warm, warm, warm. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, his eyes had faded back to silver. But they held something they'd never held before. Light. The curse, he breathed. I can feel it. It's gone. Not just for you. Morven's voice came from the doorway. The old healer had returned, her eyes wide with wonder. I can sense it. The bloodline curse has been broken entirely. Your children, your children's children, none of them will carry it. Kadrick's hand found Sable's stomach. Our child, he said softly. Our child will be free. Yes. She pressed her hand over his. Free and whole and loved. His eyes met hers. Loved, he repeated. I love you, Sable. I should have said it sooner. Should have risked everything sooner. You said it when it mattered. She kissed his forehead, his cheeks, his lips again. That's all that counts. 8 months later, the gardens of Valdrin Keep had never looked more beautiful. Summer had transformed the grounds into a riot of color, roses and lilies, and wildflowers tumbling over each other in fragrant profusion. Bees droned lazily in the warm air, birds sang from every tree. And in the center of it all, Sable sat on a blanket, her infant daughter cradled in her arms. Nesta had her father's silver eyes and her mother's dark hair. She was barely a month old, but already her personality was emerging, curious, alert, reaching for everything with tiny, grasping fingers. She's going to be trouble. Kadrick dropped down beside them, pressing a kiss to Sable's temple before leaning in to let Nesta grab his finger. I can tell already. Like her father. Like her mother, I think. His smile was warm. Everything about him was warm now. The cold that had plagued him his entire life had vanished the night Sable broke the curse. He slept through the night without shivering. He walked through winter snow without discomfort. He loved without fear. Morven says my training is progressing well, Sable said. Another few months, and I should have complete control. The fire magic that had saved Kadrick's life now flowed through her veins like a second heartbeat. She was learning to shape it, control it, and use it for healing rather than destruction. The people of Valdrin had already begun calling her the Flame Queen, a title she was still getting used to. And your sister? Kadrick asked. Petra's taking well to her council seat. She's proposed 3 new reforms this month alone. Sable smiled. Father's lands are being redistributed to the villages he taxed into poverty. She's overseeing it personally. And your father himself? Still in his cell. Sable's smile faded slightly. He'll spend the rest of his life there. It's more mercy than he deserves. Kadrick was quiet for a moment. Then he shifted closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. You know, he said softly, when I walked into that village square, I was looking for someone who would ask nothing of me, someone I could keep at a distance, someone safe. I know. Instead, I found you. He pressed his lips to her hair. The most dangerous woman in the realm, the one person who could break a curse that had haunted my family for generations. Dangerous? She raised an eyebrow. I thought I was the quiet village girl. You were. His silver eyes sparkled with warmth. Real warmth. The kind that came from love rather than magic. Until I called you Luna. Until you showed me that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides beneath bandages and years of silence. Sometimes it waits, she agreed, for someone worth burning for. He kissed her then, soft and slow and full of promise. Nesta gurgled contentedly between them, reaching for a butterfly that had landed nearby. This was her life now. Not hiding in shadows, not bracing for cruelty, not caging the fire that had always been her birthright. She was Luna of Valdrin, mother to a princess who would never know the cold, wife to a king who had learned that love wasn't a death sentence, it was salvation. She had been the quiet village girl. Now she was the flame that had melted a kingdom of ice, and this was only the beginning.